Okay, so I thought I'd make this video tutorial in response to this question here on the Facebook Elementor community group. So the question is, how do you get this kind of layout with a testimonial? There's a lot of answers here. My take is I always try and do things without adding additional plugins wherever possible. Now, obviously it depends on your skill level. But the reality is that the more you can do yourself, the more control you have over it, the less bloat you have on your website. And it turns out this one isn't that difficult. My preference would be to do it with what Elementor already does and a little bit of custom CSS and JavaScript rather than a plugin. So pretty much what they want here is a typical standard Elementor testimonial. I'm going to do a tutorial. It's not going to look exactly like this, but with custom styling, you can make it look however you like. So what I've ended up with is a basic here. I mean, not beautiful, needs some styling. Just make it nice and big so you can see what I'm doing. And as I change slides, whether it's through the bullets or sliding here, my image on the right slides. Now this image could be anywhere. So this is a stock standard Elementor Testimonial Widget, and this is a stock standard Elementor image widget. So whipping into how we do this, if we look over here in the back end and have a look at our testimonial widget here, as you can see, it's a standard testimonial widget with 3 items. The image on the right hand side here is just an image that we've selected as our testimonial image. So easily add another one just by duplicating that, change the image to something else. Now we've got a 4th image. So may not show up yet because I've got to run the JavaScript for it. So let me just check that. That's actually the wrong ratio for this. So if they're all the same ratio, that would fit in there. So that's a bad example. But even if I did do that, go back to my Scratch page. There it is there. Wrong ratio. So the images should all be the right ratio, the same ratio for this to work well. So I'll just pull that out. What I'm demonstrating is all you need to do is change that image. Now in the settings here, we've just set all the breakpoints to 1 slide. So desktop, tablet and mobile is all set to 1. In the additional options, we've got our arrows turned off. You can turn them on if you want. Autoplay turned off. And we set the image size to medium large. So we want it big enough for what it's going to display on the right hand side here, but not too large. So if you set it to full, it'll be just too big an image to download. So just the largest size you need on that side there. So that's pretty much that as far as these settings go. Now in the advanced settings, I've given this a ID of source slider, which we're going to use in the JavaScript. In the positioning, we've set it to a custom width of 50% of the container that it's in. And that's pretty much all you need to do to get the slider working. Now, what I've done here to make this more like the community group here, not exactly like, but more like it, is I've added some custom CSS here to this. Sorry, one more thing we need to do here is hide the actual image. If I take that out, see we've got the image there that the slider would normally put in there. You could leave that there if you want a small thumbnail, and the rollover you get the big one. Or if you want to hide this, we need the CSS to select that image and just set it to display none. The bullets, which is this set of bullets here, is normally on the bottom. Take that out, that's where the bullets normally sit. There's not really much control over that in the widget settings, so we've got to do this with a custom CSS. So what we're doing is targeting the pagination bullets. It's already set to absolute, so we're just telling it to set the positioning to the top and align the text to the left, so it lines everything to the left. What we're then doing is saying, by default, this will have a padding of 40 on the bottom, 0 on the top. We want to reverse that, so we've got 40 pixels on the top, everything else is 0, so that we've got some space for these bullets here. So we can make that closer if you want to, just by making that say 30, whatever you like. And then we set the margin to 0 because by default, this puts about a 16 pixel margin either side of that, so it kind of looks like it's just off the, just pull it out and show it to me. So it pushes it in by about 16 pixels, so it's out of line with the bullets. We just put a margin in there of 16 pixels, and that's pretty much all done with that slider. So to add more, we just add more slides. Now, what we now have is a image widget on the right hand side here, and it is a stock standard image widget. We've set the size to 768, so it matches what we're going to do from here. In the styling, I've just added a little bit of styling, put a border radius on it and drop shadow around it. Pretty much all I've done to the image. In the advanced, I've given it an ID of destination image, which we use in the JavaScript. And in the custom CSS, so that it fades in, what I've done is said the image has an opacity of 0.1 when it's not selected. And then when the image changes, transition the opposite opacity to 1 over a 1 second period. So that's what we see here when we change these. So it fades, so the image fades in as it slides. That's the CSS to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the image. Now for the tricky bits, the HTML. So, or JavaScript that is. So all we're doing here is, so remember with the slider, I gave it an ID of source slider. So I'm just telling a JavaScript variable, a constant in this case, to be hash source slider, which means ID of source slider, image selector as hash destination image, and then the actual image element inside that, because this is actually the container, not the image. So we want to reference the actual image element inside there. Let's ignore this function here for the moment. I'll come back to that. Now, because jQuery is not available and the carousel hasn't been initialized when this HTML is read, we have to wait for the window to load and be ready. So what we're saying is on the window, add an event listener of load. So we're waiting for everything to load. Then we've got access to jQuery. Then we can get a carousel reference. So the carousel is a jQuery carousel reference is to source slider, which is this. We want to find all the images. So each one of these slides has one image. So we've got a jQuery collection for the testimonial images and the image element inside each of those, so each of the images. And we're going to use those as this function over here. We then set our destination image jQuery reference to the image selector, which is the destination image, and then the image element. Where did we get to? Okay, and then what we want to do is remove the source set from this, because the source set will have the images from the original image that we added here. So if we change the source, it won't change the image because the source set has multiple images at different screen sizes, which will override it. So we want to get rid of that attribute. So we just set the attribute of the source set to 0, or sorry, not 0, to empty. Now, swiper ref here is when the Elementor widgets initialize a swiper. So they use the Swiper.js library for pretty much all of their sliders, whether it's a testimonial image, whatever, anything that slides. Elementor is using the Swiper.js library. And what they've done is when you get a reference to the widget container and you find the swiper container inside that, so I'll actually just bring up in my F12 Chrome tools, show you what I mean. So here's the widget. So that would be the testimonial slider widget. And then once that initializes inside of here, so we've got all these swiper containers. So there will be a swiper container. somewhere in here. There we go. So there's the swiper container there. So that gets added by the swiper JavaScript library when this is initialized. Okay, so what Elementor has done is they've added a data attribute, which is a reference to the swiper JavaScript library that is running the slider. So we get a reference for that here. And then one of the swiper.js methods is on for listening to an event. So on real index change, you can have a look at the swiper.js API library. It's got all information on what all these are. What we do is that when that changes, we want to call a function, and we're going to call the set image up here, which I'll show you there, with this.realIndex. So what that does is that every time this changes, there's a property on that context called realIndex. So on swiper 0, the first swiper is 0, the second one is 1, third one is 2, etc. So we're going to call our function to change this image every time that changes. So it doesn't matter whether we slide it with our mouse or whether we change the dots, it's going to call that. Okay. So then because we haven't initialized this, all we're doing is saying when this first starts, without waiting for anything to happen, set the image to 0, so the first image. So our function here, all it's doing is taking the index or whatever the current index of that is, getting the source of whatever that image is, so the image that would normally be displaying here. So we want to get the source attribute. We want to go to the destination image, and we want to set the destination image source to be whatever the source image is for that. We then remove the changed class from this image. We need to just set a little bit of a timeout here and then add the class back. Otherwise, the DOM doesn't update and this won't apply. And this is used for that CSS. So what we're telling it is to remove the change class and then after 100 milliseconds, add it back. And if we have a look at the CSS for this image, what we're doing is saying when it's got the changed, when it hasn't got the changed class, set the opacity to 0.1. When it has got the changed class, set the opacity to 1 over a period of 1 second. So by removing the class, it's now going to have opacity of 0.1. Wait 100 milliseconds, add the class, it's now going to transition through to an opacity of 1 over 1 second. So that's the reason we do that. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, a couple of benefits of doing it this way is this image here. Right. Let's say we add I don't know why you do this, but let's say we add another section up here. I can just as easily drag that up there, update that. Actually, one better just check something. I think when you drag and drop, it changes the ID. So let me just check that. Okay, works just the same because they're linked via the ID, not via the widget. So I'll drag that back down into here. We're back to there. So it gives you a lot of more control. When you use plugins that have widgets, you're kind of constrained to what functionality they have, and it's a lot better if you can do it without plugins if you know how to do it. One of the things I first looked at is just using CSS to take this image here and set some positioning so that it's outside of this over here, but you can't do that because the way these sliders work, when you have a look at the container, the overflow in here, swipe wrapper, slide, make the slide there. Not on there. Here we go. So the overflow is set to hidden. So within that sort of box there. So if I move this image outside of that box using CSS, it's just going to get cropped to the edge of that because it's actually within the DOM underneath that. So it's not going to work. So the only way you can do this is the way I've done it, which is have it as a separate element, link them using JavaScript. Someone mentioned that you can use, what was it? Unlimited elements. Yes and no. Unlimited elements is linking to specific elements. You may be able to do this, I'm not sure. You might have to use specific sliders, specific things. I really don't know, I haven't used it. But I just don't understand why you would need to add a plugin to do something that you can do as easily as this. Now, obviously that's going to depend on your skill level, but hopefully this will show you how to do that. I will save this as a exported template and I will put a link to it in the description of this video. So hopefully that will help you to be able to resolve this and do whatever you wish with it. Style it the way you like and link things exactly how you want them. Thank you.